Ron Shaich is the founder of iconic brands like Au Bon Pain and Panera Bread, investor in food brands such as Cava and Tate, and now author of the book, Know What Matters. In this conversation, Ron and I discuss how to build iconic brands, why ubiquity can breed contempt, and what founders should consider before taking their companies public. It was a conversation filled with practical takeaways you can apply to your life today. I hope you enjoy. Ron, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Polina. It's good to speak to you.
Good to see you again. Okay, so I want to start with, few people may know that your entrepreneurial journey kind of started with a cookie store, and you weren't exactly the type of guy who thought you could ever be interested in business. So can you tell me about how you became an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, I really was much more driven to help change the world. That was the fuel of my
Change the world in what way?
They have an impact to make this a better place. I grew up in the anti-war movement, the time of social change, and I thought people who were making a difference in the world were the people that were part of that change, and I wanted to be a part of it. I got to college, and I was treasurer of the student body, tossed out of a local convenience store. I walked back and said, you know what? What are we putting up with this nonsense for? Let's open our own nonprofit convenience store.
And you were tossed out because they thought you were shoplifting?
Hard to believe, yes. And ironically, I ended up on the board of that company 10 years later. But yes, they threw us out. And it was just a heavy security presence. And I came back and I said, we're going to open our own nonprofit convenience store. And it was, I taxed the student body $60,000. There was nobody to run it, so I decided to run it. I took the summer, built it. All I can tell you is for a kid from New Jersey who can't dance or sing, it was the most creative thing I ever did in my life. It was like a live performance art. And I loved it. I loved that creative process of figuring out how to get that store open. I loved the process of running the store. I loved the process of hiring. And it set off a challenge in my life of what am I going to do? Am I going to do business or am I going to do politics? And over the next 5 to 10 years, that got pulled apart. And what I came to conclude, Polina, and I think it's very interesting, is all roads lead to the same place. Everybody obsesses on, well, what's the path one should take? Should I take a business path, a political path? And in reality, when I was doing business, I always thought of it in a political context, the sense that a business is a small society. And it's one place where the leader gets to influence that society and define it. Tax policy is equivalent to compensation. What do you reward? What don't you? Why does one system work better than the other? I know you come from Bulgaria, your family immigrant. What was it about that process? And what was it about Bulgaria and how that system worked versus another? On the other hand, I can also tell you that when I did, frankly, politics, I was always I was always the strategist. And so my life played out. I did the general store. I got an opportunity to go to the Harvard Business School. I went because they didn't accept me as an undergraduate. I came out of there. I looked at doing political campaigns, went to DC and ran a political consulting firm, worked in it. And I also helped a number of organizations go into business, Mass Fair Share. I helped them raise money. On the other hand, I had this opportunity to open a cookie store. I had worked in the cookie business, and I couldn't lease a space for a cookie store. And somebody called me and said, I have a jewelry store. Inflation is roaring. It was 20% in 1980. And
oh, wow.
Hard to believe, imagine those days, but inflation was 20%. We want to consolidate our inventory, the jewelry. Would you like to lease our 400 square foot store? And nobody would lease me space for 2 years. And I chose to lease that space, and I created a cookie store, that 400 square foot cookie store. 6 months later, I merged with another company called Au Bon Pain. Au Bon Pain became my licensee. I became their licensee, excuse me. I became
Wait,
their
and can you share how much you, because you merged, you didn't buy it outright.
well, what occurred was they were supplying about 6 months into running my cookie store. I had 50,000 people a day going by before 12 noon, but nobody bought cookies, right? And so I decided to put in another product. I put in French baked goods. I became their licensee. I had a right to use their name, and they provided the product. As an operator, any operator knows which of their vendors are any good. The reality is that these guys were utterly out of control. Sometimes they delivered, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they billed me, sometimes they didn't. To this day, I'm sure I still owe them money. They were that far out of control. And I thought to myself, this is a powerful opportunity to take what I had learned. I had worked for a chain of cookie stores for a year after business school, to take what I'd learned in the cookie store business and apply it to French bakery. And that led to putting these two companies together. Myself, we essentially merged them. My one store, they're three. I got 60% of the company. And my partner, Lou Kane, who had run Au Bon Pain, he and his investors received 40% of the company. That company, which we formed in 1981, was the company we sold in 2017 for $7.5 billion to JAB. Same company through multiple transformations.
It all started with a cookie, though.
Yes.
That's amazing. So, okay, so take us to, in your book, you talk about this really cool concept. You said that when you were conceiving what you wanted Panera Bread to be, you had this thing you called a concept essence, which is an emotional blueprint for a company's competitive DNA. Explain that a little bit more and how you used it to design what Panera became, but also every transformation of the business.
Yeah, well, I think it starts with an understanding that what matters most in a business is literally being a better competitive alternative. What does that mean in simple terms? It means having customers that are your target, that are willing to walk past your competitors, past all those other places on the block and come to you. If you can get people to choose you, some people to choose you because you're a better alternative for them. The restaurant industry is dirt farming. It's a terrible industry. You get your market share. It's really hard. You don't make any money. If you can create something special enough, then you, in the end, have a viable business. And value creation, that is to say, economic return, is a byproduct. It's not an end. It's a byproduct of being a better competitive alternative. So what a concept essence document is a very clear blueprint for how you're going to market. What is the theatrical production you're putting on? What is the elements of it? And how is it from the eyes of the customer, they're going to experience it? You know, I've run massive organizations with over 100,000 employees, and organizations in which thousands of people are working on elements of the concept. If there isn't clarity of what we're trying to accomplish, there's a reversion to the mean. And what a concept essence document defines is, what are we trying to do in terms of food? What are we trying to do in terms of the attitude of that food? How does design tie into it? What do we want people to feel when they walk into our establishment? What is the human element of it? How do we want people to feel about our people, our customers? How do they want? What is it we want our team members to give off? What is it in terms of the overarching aesthetic or the voice or the soul? And the reality is, every brand, and particularly in a retail sense, has a personality. So what this is an opportunity to define the personality that we want this to live into. And what it allows, if we do it with real clarity, you know, you're a wordsmith. Writing a concept essence is about getting the right words. If the words are cliches and they don't cut, nobody knows which direction to go. So when we use the concept essence as a North Star. I often think about it when over the years, these businesses meander and they revert to the mean. And what the concept essence does, that North Star, it's typically done and it will last for a decade or two. It's how we want to be seen, and most importantly, emotionally felt by our target customer.
It's so interesting because as a customer, when I think of my favorite places to go, I don't think about, what type of food necessarily is served or what the CEO wants me to think. It's more about like, how do I feel when I'm there? But that's such a hard thing to define. You just said, like, how do we want people to feel? When I was talking to Danny Meyer, he also said something like, if we can't scale a feeling, we'll never be able to build something meaningful. But how do you scale a feeling? Like, that's such a mushy thing. Like, how can you do that?
Well, I can't scale your feeling. What I can scale is the stimulus I put out to you that allows you to feel something. So at the core, if you think about Panera and you ultimately think about fast casual, which Panera became the poster child for in this ideology, what we were really selling in Panera was a sense of your own self-esteem. Before Panera came along, before Starbucks came along, the prevailing motif in restaurants was fast food. Either in an independent restaurant or fast food. What was fast food selling at the emotional level? Essentially, a lot of food for not a lot of money. It was. I used to call it
efficiency.
Well, yeah, but it's almost. It was like a self-service gasoline station for the human body. It's 4:00. How do I most quickly inject nutrition into my arms? Basically it was nutritional cocaine, right? I'm hungry, I'm starving, let me eat. It wasn't an experience that elevated me or made me feel good. And what we discovered in the early 90s, what became pretty clear to me listening to customers with empathy, trying to really hear, was that probably 1 out of 3 customers walked into fast food and they felt depleted by the experience and they didn't feel good about themselves in it. And we began to say, let's change the currency. What's the currency? We want you to feel better about yourself when you came in there, which then meant we had to have environments that engaged you, food that you respected, people that respected you and you felt good with. And ultimately that elevated your sense of self when you were there. And so again, to the point you raise, I can't manage your feeling, but I can do the things that induce you to feel certain things. And my job is to figure out what those needs are for you, what those jobs you want met, and to do it. Again, when Panera emerged, there were very few alternatives that served you food you felt good about, that respected you and got you in and out. And there was a huge market for it, but nobody wanted to acknowledge it. And we could see it and feel it. And the question was, how do we scale that?
Yeah. And going off of exactly this, another concept that I wrote down from your book is, you call this phenomenon a drive for specialness. And you talk about how it became one of the most popular trends for the modern consumer. So for example, if you grew up in the 60s and 70s, places like McDonald's made you feel really special. I grew up in Bulgaria and McDonald's was this like American phenomenon. I had my birthday there. Like it was a nice place. Yeah.
Oh, I remember going to the first McDonald's in Pushkin Square in Moscow, first one in Russia. When it first opened up, there was seating for hundreds. There were thousands of people in line. Yeah, it was a cultural phenomenon.
It was incredible. And my dad was obsessed with America. So this was like the most special thing we could do. But then when we moved to Atlanta and I went to a McDonald's, I was like, this is not the same feeling at all. So for
one element to that, if I may interrupt you.
Yeah, of course.
Is ubiquity breeds contempt. So when McDonald's showed up in Bulgaria, it was a huge deal.
Right.
It was special. But when there is a McDonald's on every corner, it's not very special. And frankly, it no longer represents American culture as it did to you as a young Bulgarian. And so your feelings are different, but you're getting to the very core of this, which is helping people, creating the kind of experiences, both with humanity. This is theater. and it's 3D live performance theater, and we're casting people into it. We're using food as sort of the props, and we're giving people a set of stimuli or such that they have a set of experiences, and not the least of which in many of our modern establishments today, what we're trying to build at Act 3 is we're creating environments people want to sit and socialize, connect, humanity. But at any rate, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's so interesting how it's like kind of all cyclical. It's like, first people wanted to linger. Then they wanted to get in their car and drive through and just not be in the restaurant at all. Now it's like a comeback to like, I want to linger. I want to enjoy time with my friends in person. It's so fascinating.
The one thing I would say is, and you asked me about the drive for specialness.
Yeah.
One of the most important searches that I have always been on is trying to listen to and read the consumer and try to figure out today what's going to matter tomorrow. And what I'm always looking for is, how do I separate the wheat from the chaff? How do I separate the signal from the noise? What is the deeper trends that are playing out over a decade or multiple decades, not what is hot and fashionable today that will be gone tomorrow? And I think you're probably trying to understand what's the through point in everything you write. You're trying to understand what's the deeper trend. And what we discovered in the early 90s was a powerful, powerful trend that was that actually led to fast casual. Ultimately, post-World War II, all products in America, pre-World War II, all products in America were made locally. Post-World War II, American corporate America took off. And between the 1950s and the early 90s, every major consumer category was consolidated. There was usually 1, 2, or 3 brands that had 90% or more market share collectively, and they competed based on advertising dollars and shelf space. That was the nature. By the early 90s, people began to wake up in America and say, my God, everything's the same. I want to feel special in a world that isn't special. And you began to see it play out in categories. You saw it in coffee. In coffee, you saw it with Folgers and Maxwell House. And you began to see that lent itself to specialty coffee, to Peet's. You saw it with beer. Anheuser-Busch and Miller, a good friend of mine in Boston, Jim Cook, created Samuel Adams. It was a reaction to these mass-marketed beers. He was doing it the way his grandparents did it in a local brewery. No chemicals, doing it right. You saw the same phenomenon in beverages. Coke and Pepsi dominated. They lent themselves to Waldo, to Snapple, and to the total disaggregation of beverages, where you have fragmentation, 300 or 400 different beverages in a 7-Eleven today. People were waking up and they wanted to feel special in a world in which, frankly, everything was the same. Same things apply to the restaurant industry. In 92 and 93, we looked around, saw this deeper trend, and said, my God, this is going to happen in restaurants. Essentially, people are going to want to feel special in a world in which the only alternatives are fine dining and fast food. And what we set out to generate was ultimately a specialty restaurant. If there was specialty beer, specialty coffee, if there was specialty drinks, we were going to do specialty food that elevated you, that elevated your sense of self-esteem, that actually made you feel better. We then applied the same principles to a bakery. Bakery business, same thing happened. All bread had once been local. Post-World War II, it was morphed into 3 loaves for 99 cents at Kroger or Stop and Shop. And by the early 90s, people began to wake up and say, I could do this like my grandparents do it. No chemicals, no preservatives, done right. And you began to see the growth of artisan bread, Acme and Grace out in the West Coast. And we began to say, wow, if there's going to be specialty bread, and that is a powerful platform, a powerful point of authority to do what we would call a specialty restaurant. And at the core, Panera was created as that ideologically. And then we applied that through a concept essence document. How does that take form? And we spent a year wordsmithing that, trying to get clear. What did it mean? It began with, our bread is our passion, soul, and expertise. The food has to be as good as the bread. We are in the business of bringing people together. We're in the business of creating those kinds of environments. We're in the business of helping people understand what craft bread can do for their lives. These are the kinds of intentions we had within Concept Essence, and then we tried to define what that meant. An example for it, right? We wanted to have an environment that I used to refer to as visual candy. Wherever you sat, you were engaged. And this was antithetical to what was present in fast food, where they were using, Formica, bolting the chairs down to the floor, and basically, clothing their team members in paper hats. The team members in fast food were simply extensions of the cash register.
Right.
And so we were going to be the antithesis to that specialty restaurant based on specialty bread.
Yeah. Wow. That's fascinating. The thing that I noticed in your book is that you're very, very good at observing people and noticing their patterns, which is, you were at Panera, you saw that after people were done.
I'm moving into your job, Polina.
Yeah, exactly.
Seriously, it's the same thing, isn't it?
It really is. It really is, because it's like you study people, and if you study people, you notice patterns, which then leads to ideas. But fun fact for everybody, Ron, I recently found out, has been a long-time profile subscriber, which I appreciate.
One of the original ones.
One of the originals.
Yes.
So you were at Panera and you saw people, okay, we're done with our meal and we're still lingering and either talking with coworkers or moms or meeting with other moms. They just wanted a place to linger. As the CEO of a growing company, how do you make sure that you spend your time on like the high level, high impact, thorny problems while also staying close to the action on the ground, and being involved in the day to day? Like when I was thinking about that, isn't that nearly impossible? Don't you just have to pick one or the other?
Not at all. So before we answer, I want to go back to something else you said, and I think it's really important. A lot of what you do with the profile is you study people and the choices they make and why. And you then essentially elevate that to generalizations that either you make or your readers can make that have broader applicability. To me, that's actually what we in business do all the time. It's trying to read, and actually not read, it's trying to listen to, intensely listen to, walk in the shoes of our target customers and trying to extract from that, what is the job they want done? They want to hire somebody for, and then extract from that the generalizations about what's going to matter tomorrow, and most importantly, tomorrow. And that's really the process of discovering today what's going to matter tomorrow. And often you can look at other industries and transfer from that other industry the generalization and use it within your business or industry. I think the same thing occurs in life. I mean, we look at other people's lives and both their successes and their mistakes. And we can then use those to extract generalizations that we can transfer over into our own experiences in our own life.
You summed up the profile perfectly.
Yeah. I mean, I think we share that. And I think we share that as I do as a business leader. The most important part is to understand that, because if I don't, and by the way, I think that's also the part about learning about, to the best of our ability, how to have a successful life, to try to figure out what works and what doesn't. So you asked me a question, how do you find time to do that, to listen, and at the same time deal with these larger issues? And I guess I would say to you that they are both fundamental to the leadership of an organization. I don't care whether you're the president of the United States or you're running a 3-employee dry cleaner around the corner. If you don't start with empathically listening and understanding what people are hiring you for, what they want from you, if you don't understand that, you're not going to be able to get it done. If you're the president of the United States, what is it that your voters, your target consumer, what is it that they want from their leadership? What is it, I think it's one of the challenges in this country with our division. But what is it we want our leaders to fulfill? And on the other hand, once you've gone through that process of empathetic listening, as the leader, you've got to decide what fundamental bets you're making that are really going to matter. Let me see if I can share with you by way of a story and use politics.
Yeah, I would love that.
Look at the presidents of the United States. They're active 18 hours a day, but in the end, they get remembered for 1, 2, or 3 things. You can think back to Bush in 9/11, his reaction to that. You can march forward and you can look at Obama and Obamacare. You can think about Trump and maybe it's COVID, maybe it's January 6th. You think about Biden. I don't know what it's going to be. Maybe it's going to be Afghanistan. Maybe it will be Biden economics. But it's the same in a company. What are the 2 or 3 or 4 things that are going to matter 5 years from now and 10 years from now? And what is it you have to get right? Which is why I opened this book with a powerful lesson that I learned. I watched my parents both pass away. And in watching them both pass away 25 and 30 years ago, I realized that there is a judgment day. If you have chronic illness, you go through a review of your life and you start to step back and say, I really respect this about myself. I don't respect that. And in watching my parents go through that, I began to say to myself, the time to do that is not on your deathbed, not in the 9th inning with 2 outs, but in the 7th inning, the 5th inning, and the 3rd inning. And for me, that led me to begin to do that. And I would sit down every Christmas week and literally begin to ask myself questions. How do I feel in relationship with my body, with my health? How do I feel? Where do I want to be in relationship with my body and my health in 5 years? Where do I want to be in relationship with my work and what I'm doing? Where do I want to be in my primary relationships with my family? Where do I want to be in my spiritual relationship? And I would literally write down the goal for 5 years out, almost the headlines that would be in that story that I would write about myself 5 years from now. Somebody else might write in the New York Times or something about what this guy did. I then would break that up into, okay, how do I get there? And I'd break it up into annual initiatives to get to that place I wanted to get to. And then literally quarterly projects. And what's so interesting to me, I took that lesson from life because I've been doing that for 30 years, just that process. Forward, where do I want to be in 5 years? And then breaking it up into how I'm going to get there. That's how I run a business. And so when you ask me the question, how do you stay focused on what matters? It's from that process and not become what we don't want to do. What we do want to do is listen and then understand what really matters and focus our time, our treasure, our talent, all of our resources on those few things we said really matter that we're going to judge ourselves on. The world's going to judge us on in 3 years, 5 and 10. So I'm very long-term focused in terms of what matters. I'm also trying to stay very close to listening. And relative to listening, I want to add something else. I still do. I'd spend, 30, 40% of my time in my restaurants talking to customers, talking to people that were team members. And, when the CEO of a 100,000 employee comes in, everybody gets excited. And, it's a whole ceremonial thing. And I often would want to go where people didn't know who I was or slip in. But most importantly, it wasn't undercover boss. It was something different. I was there not to check up on my team members and not to check up on my stores. I was there to check up on myself. Because when I went into a restaurant, I was trying to figure out, how did we impact our people at the front lines? How did all these initiatives we had within the company impact our customer? And so that was the process that we were really focused on.
And I kind of love that because it's a concept essence for everything in your life. It's not just business. You can apply it to your personal life too.
Yeah, I think we would call it a pre-mortem,
A
Polina.
pre-mortem.
Yes, and so instead of doing a post-mortem at the end, right? You're basically writing what do you want your eulogy to be, your obituary. What do you want the headlines to be when they write the article about the success of the profile, when they write the article about the success of your business, when they write the article about the success of your life? What are the elements of it you want in 5 and 10 years to be there? And then how are you going to get there? And then organize everything around that, as opposed to being reactive, which is what I see in so many people. They are simply reacting to the stimuli coming at them and the pressures they have. And, I often see in our industry, my competitors are all looking sidewards and they're all following what everybody else does. I want to look at them and say, no, you're looking at the wrong direction. Look forward and figure out what you need to be, who you need to be to accomplish what you want.
Yeah. Ooh, that's good. At one point in your journey, though, I remember you talking about how there was a point where your personal life was there was a lot of chaos and turbulence, to the point where you were hoping the board would just oust you from the company. That's such a bold admission, by the way. I was like, I can't believe you just wrote that. But even in the face of that, you said that you still went to work every day and you were still able to motivate your team and motivate yourself. How?
I think there's a couple of things to it. First, the way I motivated myself, I would say, is rooted in responsibility. Leadership is responsibility. Real leadership is responsibility. And what most impacted me is the fact that I had 125,000 people counting on me. I had thousands of management personnel who I would get up in front of and I would say, we're going that way. And I sure hope we were right, because their mortgages, their kids' college educations, all the things that mattered in their lives, we're counting on it. I had $5, $6, $7 billion of investor capital. I had a vision that for creating an experience in communities all over America. And I guess the core of it is I felt this sense of responsibility to deliver on what I said, to get us there, to get them there. And I think that, the dirty little secret of leadership is nobody really knows what's true or what's going to happen. But at some point, you have to get up and help guide people. You have to get up and say to people, okay, we're going this way and why. And I've often thought that the role of a CEO, political leader or business leader, is more akin to a parish priest. And by that I mean that a role we play is trying to create meaning, helping people understand where we're coming from, where we are at this moment in time, and then based on the choices they make, where we will end up, and trying to paint a longitudinal picture for them that helps inform what's going on. And I want you to know this. You talk about the pain of leadership. It's one of the things I wanted to talk about in this book, because anybody who tells you it's not true doesn't understand. Even when you believe you're doing the right thing, there's still the pressure of time. And I used to think about a quote. I believe it's from Vince Lombardi. Yeah. He said, he never lost a game. He just ran out of time. What I most feared is I wouldn't have enough time to do what I knew was the right thing. But I can remember in the around 2015, when I was going through the fourth transformation I speak about in this book, and the most, the probably the largest transformation of a large public restaurant company in America, when we transformed Panera based on digital and loyalty and omnichannel and clean food. And I had activists attacking me, and there was huge pressure, and and things weren't always going right. And I can remember literally getting out. I live in Boston on Starro Drive, and thinking to myself, my God, it'd be just easier if I got hit by a truck. Not that I
Wow.
wanted to die. It's not a suicide wish. It was a sense of the overwhelming sense of responsibility I felt to all these other people, to all these constituents who were betting on me. And I wanted to salute and support those folks. That's the pressure, that pressure that I wanted to deliver for the good people that actually cared to believe in me in a world where nothing was actually certain. I wanted them to be validated by what we were able to do with the company. But in the end,
Yeah.
I think a lot of how we deal with pain, and I'll share with you something. I'm turning 70 this year.
No.
I believe by the time you get to 60, every one of us gets kneecapped in some way. You don't get through life without real challenges and real pain. And the question is not avoiding pain and avoiding tough things. The challenge is how you deal with it. And one of the stories I talk about in this book when I talk about pain is when I was going through the toughest moments in 15 with activists attacking me, people leaving, nobody, a number of people not believing in the vision, and trying to the transformation vision. I can remember one day when my CFO quit on 2 weeks' notice. He, wasn't earning what he thought he should make in his bonus, and it just whacked me in like a punch in the stomach. And I had a tough day, and 6 o'clock at night, my family was vacationing up in Manchester, Massachusetts. And my daughter, Emma, calls me and says, "Dad, would you come up tonight and put me to bed?" And I couldn't have been more exhausted, Polina. And my first reaction is, "Emma, I can't do it tonight. I'm just beat." And then she said, "Daddy, please."
Yeah.
And she said, I had a really tough day. And I decided, okay, I'll go up there. And with traffic, it took me an hour and a half. I got up there about 8:30, and I laid down in bed with her. She started telling me about her day. And again, I had a horrible day, but I'm not telling her about that.
Right.
Right. And she says to me, goes through it. And as she's falling asleep, I say, "Emma, if you lay down, right, you're going to go to sleep, relax. You're going to wake up tomorrow. The sun is going to be shining, and you get up, and you're going to feel different. It's a whole new day." And you just have to go through it. And I can remember driving back that night, because I drove back to Boston, and I realized the person I was talking to was not just Emma, it was myself. That you just have to put one step forward. At some point it does change. You just have to stay focused on what you're going to respect, and stay focused on doing it, and make the right trade-offs along the way.
Yeah. My dad used to tell me the morning is wiser than the night. Like whatever you're worried about at night, just wait till the morning.
I love that.
Yeah. So one of my favorite lines from your book is conserve in a boom, build in a bust.
Yes.
And it's fascinating because 2008, kind of the depths of the financial crisis, somehow ended up being one of Panera's better or best years, in
Better
which the
or
company,
best stores ever built. Yeah.
yeah, the company met or exceeded its earning targets each quarter of that year. So how on earth did that happen? And did you go into it thinking that, or was it more of a rear view? Oh, we built in a time where everybody else was like freezing.
Well, so I have to start in just the facts. During the recession, we drove mid-single digit comps. Our EBITDA was up strongly. Our stock was up strongly through that process. And I guess the roots of it is what I would suggest is a very contrarian nature, how I think. If everybody's going one way, I want to challenge that and say, why? Maybe there's a better path. And I don't want to get trampled by the elephants in the herd. So I'm always looking for that. And I can tell you that industry as life is filled with people that are reacting to what everybody's saying today. And the trick is to get above that and figure out where you're trying to get to tomorrow. And so that's the nature of a contrarian. And so in the boom days, pre the Great Recession, 08, 09, right? In the boom days, everybody couldn't spend enough money. They were borrowing money, levering up, taking risk, chasing very expensive real estate deals, growth. At that point, I said, this is crazy. Why do I want to take that kind of financial risk on? God forbid there's ever a problem. And why do I want to chase every last dollar? I want to conserve resources, because I want to make sure if there's ever an opportunity, I can then move in an aggressive way. When the recession hit, frankly, I saw it as a powerful opportunity. At that point, all of my competitors were running around public companies and their sales were declining. They're flattening out and they were ripping costs out of the P&L. And I thought to myself, wow, right? This is a great opportunity to build competitive advantage. If they're ripping costs out of the P&L, the only way to do it is by diminishing the guest experience. That means longer lines, dirtier tables, less happy and more frazzled team members. That was a point where we said, we're going to put more money into the guest experience, more labor into the stores. And we found that we were competitively better. And what we then found was that our sales, our same-store sales went up. Similarly, right, if during the boom days we had slowed down the growth because everything was very expensive and crazy, when the recession hit, we still had a great concept. At that point, I did exactly the opposite. I increased the growth rate. I think we went up 150 to 200% in our growth rate. Literally, real estate costs came down because real estate is priced on a spot market basis, but it can last for 15 years. Our real estate costs came down, development costs came down, opportunities went up. We increased materially the growth rate, and those stores we built during those times were the highest return on investment stores ever built in the company. The key is understand the context. I cannot, a very interesting point, people, often ask me as a public company CEO, I ran it for 27 years, how do you respond to inflation? How do you respond to recession? How are you going to respond to this change in the law? My answer is typically, I'm not going to control those things.
Right.
What I can control is my reaction. And I know my job is to figure out a better adaptation to whatever's happening than my competitors. So my job is not to somehow understand or infer what the marketplace or the world is doing. It is to understand how to build a better competitive alternative and do a better job for my guests. When that happens, the byproduct always is value creation.
It's fascinating how constraint almost always breeds creativity, whether you like it or not.
Well, I think it's true in every organization, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, right? Too much resources makes it too easy. And we don't make the hard choices. And we as humans, by our nature, procrastinate and put off the hard decisions. And in some ways, what I tried to do, and what I'm trying to do in all of our investments today, is build large companies that think like a small company, not small companies that think and act like a big company, and bring to it all the detriments of that kind of invincibility.
And I want to talk about just briefly about one of those companies. You're a very, very early backer of Cava, which went public this summer when everybody else said, oh no, we're not going to go public. This is a horrible market. Cava still did.
Yes.
And it went well. So why did it go public then? And what are some questions that you recommend startup founders or founders that are thinking about going public should ask themselves before making that decision?
Yes. So going public was great for Cava because Cava was right to be a public company. Cava, first and foremost, it exists in a powerful niche, Mediterranean. Mediterranean could be the next Mexican. It may be
I've been saying that for years, Ron.
So
Nobody takes me serious.
You should have invested. I mean, I literally, when I made that first investment 8 years ago, and when I I'll tell you the story in a second, how I got very involved and became the chairman of Cava when I led their acquisition of Zoe's. But it's a powerful, powerful category in the restaurant industry, a specialty niche. Cava, has been built to be the best and dominant and most attractive brand, the best competitive alternative in that niche. So it's very clear we can see our path to 1,000 or more restaurants. You need to have that to be a strong public company. If you don't have growth and you don't have that avenue of that, the market will be very unhappy. The market doesn't pay for today's earnings. The market is essentially paying for its perception of your future earnings. In addition, this company was prepared to be public. We have a great CEO in Brett Schulman, a superb CFO. They had spent a year and a half we spent with them preparing for what it meant to run a public company. We were running quarterly earnings calls. They understood how to deal with and deliver for the public market in a way in which consistency mattered. I think as much as anything, we also seeded it with some of the best long-term investors in the country, ourselves and our other lead investor, Invis. I think we control 40% of the company. We're here for the long term. Yeah. We're here with this management team for the long term. In addition, we brought in cornerstone investors like T. Rowe Price, who had been who I had brought in earlier, who I knew very intimately. We had helped them make billions of dollars. We brought in Capri, which is the Americas Fund, again, as cornerstone investors. So almost all of the original shareholders when this company went public were very long-term in nature. And so we built the base of a successful public company. And Cava has, we're highly confident Cava is set up to deliver and deliver well for the foreseeable future. Now, I compare that to many companies that go public. Here's the reality. If you'll see in the book, because I speak to it, 90% of CEOs who take a company public live to regret it. Because they aren't ready to be public. They don't have the makings of a public company. And the market is brutal and will chew them up alive. And if they don't understand the name of the game, which is to essentially project reasonably and then deliver it or over deliver it, they lose. And it's about that consistency and that trust. And so 90% of CEOs live to regret it. Cava, I believe, is going to be one of those few in which going public was the appropriate thing for it at that time.
And as someone who has built or helped build too some of the most iconic brands in the food industry, what is, according to Ron, the next multi-billion-dollar food brand?
Well, it's going to be one of the ones that we own, right? Right? I mean, we think, Cava's, it's got the potential to be one of the great companies in this industry. We also own a concept called Life Alive. It's positive eating, mostly plant forward.
You think plant forward is kind of the next dominant?
Well, I don't know if it's done, but it's a powerful niche. I can tell you that 3 to 4% of America is vegetarian, but 40% of Americans want to eat less meat. This is great food, phenomenal food that you feel good about eating. And there is somebody who's going to own that category. And we've got a brand with now 10 restaurants that's producing very high volumes that we think has got that criteria. Here's another one that we're involved in, Tate. It's in Boston and DC. It's 38 restaurants, huge volumes. I mean, I love this thing. It's a cafe and a bakery, but it has authority as third wave coffee. We're doing more than the coffee stores on the corner. It's got authority in its bakery. Its bake is all unique. It comes out of a Israeli, Lebanese, Turkish kind of attitude. And then we have chefs in every one of these cafes, and we're doing real food for breakfast and lunch and light evenings, really interesting food, all from that kind of Mediterranean or again, Israeli, Lebanese, Turkish kind of attitude. And it's interesting. And then we're doing it in an aesthetic that's wonderful. You want to sit there. The creator, the original founder of this, a woman named Zarit Orr, is powerful in her ability to create that kind of environment. And so this is something powerful. But what is it? It's a more upscale, real cafe with a powerful bakery and coffee. And we see great success for that. And then I've got another thing I'm playing with, immersive entertainment, in which we have something called Level 99, which I was I've never done a startup in 40 years. I met a guy who wanted to create this, Matt Duplessis, who had been in this industry for 25 years. It's 40,000 square feet. It's 40 or 50 challenges, some mental, some physical, combined with a farm-to-table restaurant and a brewery around the number 2 or 3 craft beer in New England. I have never seen anything like the phenomena of this. When on Saturday night, the number of people that are intrigued by this. And so these are the kinds of things: immersive entertainment, a Mediterranean bakery cafe, positive eating, Mediterranean fast casual. These are all powerful niches. And our investment thesis in Polina is essentially we're investing in these large niches that we know 5 years from now and 10 will have tailwinds at their back. And then we're working to build the dominant brand in those niches. And we take a very large stake in it. We ensure that the companies we invest in never again have to raise money. That seems like a waste of time. We provide all the capital resources, and then we provide the strategic and we provide a number of the resources if they want it to help them scale: real estate, strategic services, off premises. We have a large technology function, and we let them pull those resources down. And that enables them to focus on what really matters, where value is created, having a better concept. And here's the reality. We started with about $250 million, our own money. And we now have a portfolio that's worth well in excess of $1 billion in just a couple of years. This stuff really works.
If you're lucky enough to be a brand backed by Ron Shaich, you never have to think about raising money again. No, I just want to ask you really quickly. I think about this way too much, but so you sold Panera for $7.5 billion in 2017, and then you stepped down as CEO, I believe, in 2018.
And December 31st of 17. So
okay, December
5 months after I sold the company.
Perfect. So I think a lot about how many CEOs, especially Fortune 500 CEOs, end up tying their identity to their job title or career success. You have this on like a massive scale where not only you're the founder, you built this company, you were there as CEO for 30 years. And then on January 1st, 2018, you wake up and you're no longer CEO of Panera. Now you're just Ron. Like, how do you reconcile that? Did you have some sort of existential identity crisis, or were you fine?
Well, if I'm really honest with you, Polina, I'm not sure I solved it so well, or resolved it. 8 weeks after I stepped down as CEO of Panera, I went to Brett Schulman, the CEO of Cava, and I proposed an idea to him. I said, there's this company, Zoe's, which is also in the Mediterranean space, a public company 5 times larger than Cava. And those folks at Zoe's had come to me to help them figure out how to fix their business, how to make it better. And I thought to myself, you know what? The guys at Cava, the guys that had founded Cava, Brett and his co-founders, they were running a far better concept than Zoe's. They were much better at being able to bring the concept skills, the food skills, and fix Zoe's than I would. And I said to him, Brett, I got an idea. Let's go buy Zoe's 5 times larger than you are, right? And convert all of those into Cava. And you will end up being, in almost a hyperphase kind of way, the dominant brand in this category. And he looked at me like I was crazy. This was 8 weeks after I stepped down for Panera. And he said, well, you got to go convince my board. And he said, by the way, would you join my board? I said, all right. Right. And before I even attended a board meeting, I had to sell them on this idea of acquiring this company 5 times larger. I have to tell you, I profoundly respected the board of Cava. They saw the wisdom of this. They supported it. Didn't hurt that I agreed to help basically drive the financing of it and bring the capital in to allow them to make this acquisition. But we made that acquisition. And as Brett put it, one night he went to bed, he had 50 restaurants, And the next morning he woke up, he had the dominant brand in Mediterranean. He had 300 restaurants.
Wow.
He just had to fix them. And he went and did it. And obviously the sales went up dramatically. The brand, like flowers blossoming in the spring, became national in 24 different states. And that strategy actually worked. So I'm not so good, right? I then spent a fair bit of time supporting Tate. I had originally bought Tate for Panera, and as part of my exit agreement, I took Panera's interest out of Panera, and I took that into Act 3, our investment vehicle. I had this involvement with Life Alive, and I was back off to the races. And it's an interesting question, Polina. I'm 70. And I'm really asking myself the question, and I ask it in this book in the end of it, why am I still doing this? Because I'm still executing transformations, and listen, I haven't, since the day I stepped down from Panera, I haven't taken off more than a week. And these last 5 years have been really intense, a lot going on. I went through a divorce in my personal life. A lot going on in more broadly, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to get this book done. I turned 70 in December, and it's a gift to myself. I'm going to take a sabbatical for a couple of months, and really just focus on all those pieces of my life that have maybe I haven't had as much opportunity to do. While I've been so focused on doing this, I guess in the end, what really, looking back on it, the reason I'm still doing it, because I'm not the guy who stopped doing it.
Yeah.
Right? What I really love doing more than anything else is figuring it out. It goes back to where we started and what you're trying to do in the profile. You're trying to look at life experiences and elevate to the generalization. I love that. I love figuring out what makes these businesses work. How do you evolve and really deliver for a target customer? I absolutely love watching the people in these organizations grow. There's a better way to run these companies. We actually, I think, know that. We have a game plan for that. And it's amazingly fun, challenging, but to actually figure it out and do it. And so, for me, it's like my hobby. It's like,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And my final question is, what does the word success mean to you? How do you define it?
Self-respect, in simple terms. Starts with that pre-mortem. Have you lived a life you respect? Have you done things? Have you had an impact that you respect? Have you touched people in a way in which you respect? I just came back from my 45th business school reunion last weekend. And one of the things that we all talked about, what's your legacy? It's not the buildings that were built with your name on it. It's not the businesses that you built. Your legacy is the people who you touched. And your legacy is the people you've touched and helped them think about things in a different way, and then gone on and done great things in their own right. And I feel so good about the number of people that write me and say, Ron, you fired me, but I learned more working with you than any other experience. I thank you when I worked with you, 20 years ago and 15 years ago, and you made me think. And that to me is actually what is my legacy, and what I know will go on. And what I wanted from this book is actually what I wanted to share. Yes, with the world. Yes, with entrepreneurs. Yes, with the next generation of Fortune 500 CEOs, how you do it. But most importantly, I wanted it for my kids. I wanted to have an opportunity to put in one place the lessons I've learned, at least about business, and share it with folks about how you actually do this.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Ron. This was a great conversation.
Thank you, Polina. Take care.